Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with aging potential.
Pedro Parra wanted to be a jazz saxophonist until he realised he'd never be the next John Coltrane. Instead, he became a terroir expert. As a consultant, he's had a huge influence on wine, not just in his native Chile, but around the world. Our fascinating chat covered everything from minerality to the energy he feels in the best vineyards, the potential of Cinsault, the brother of Pinot Noir in Itata, to the democracy of geology. Hey, Pedro, how are you?
Hey, Tim, very well, doing very well. Super happy.
It's so nice to hear your voice. And you're in Chile, obviously, because it's during vintage. Are you at the winery or are you at your house in Concepcion?
No, I should be at the winery, but I am at home in Concepcion because Wi-Fi is way better. For recording, is the best.
Listen, we've seen terrible things this year, that have happened in Itata with the fires. How did they affect you? Was it bad?
No, we saw terrible things, but Itata is separate on 6 big areas, The one that got really the terrible fires were the warmer ones. So I am not there. So I would not affect, but that big movement of fires. And there was one fire in Guarilihue where it's coastal, humid, cooler. And I was very lucky I was not affected. The wind was a major help for me, move in the good direction, not my direction.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And let's begin with your name, because you're a terroir expert, you're a winemaker, you've got a PhD in viticulture and sort of soil mapping. Pedro Parra. So Parra in Spanish, as people listening who speak Spanish will know, is a vine. So you're actually called Peter Vine, right?
Yeah,
yeah. You were destined to do what you do, weren't you?
Alan York, who passed away sadly, used to call me Peter Vine from Russia. So that was my nickname in US for many years. Where is Peter Vine from Russia? So that was funny, Yeah, and Peter means Pedro. Pedro means in Italian Pietro, and Pietro means rock in Latin.
So rock and vine is your name.
It's super weird. And my home nickname for my friends, my wife, is Pit. And Pit means calicata.
A pit, like a soul pit.
Yeah. So very weird. I don't even like to think, it's too weird.
But, you were born in Concepcion, which is where you still live, which is one of the oldest wine regions in Chile. But, when you were growing up, you were kind of more interested in cinema and music than wine, weren't you? You didn't want to be a winemaker or a soil scientist.
Never. My family is a family of lawyers. My granddad, I was very close to my granddad. My granddad worked his whole life in the movie business. So like the movie Cinema Paradiso, I grew up in the cinemas, and I wanted to, other time, I'm talking 1980s. In 1980s, there was Pinochet in Chile. There's no way you can study cinema, or no way you can move to France or wherever to try to start a career on that. So that was my dream. Or architect, both.
Architecture. But, but you grew up, you're a big jazz fan. We'll talk about that later. You played in a jazz band, you learnt the saxophone, and you went to Montpellier, didn't you, in France originally?
Yes.
After your degree in forestry engineering in Concepcion, to study music, right? And was your dream to become a professional musician?
It was. I knew I had to move from Chile because nothing's going to happen, especially in those years here. So I had the language, the French. So I got a grant to study in Montpellier in the soil department. So that was the fake, idea. The money was to do that research. But my dream was to be a professional saxophonist. And in Montpellier, there was the Michel Petrucciani School of Jazz. So I went, I stayed like 1 month. I realized that was horrible. As a professional, it's terrible.
I love the story in your book, Terroir Footprints, which is very good. That you went to the conservatory and there was a 12-year-old boy playing the saxophone who was better than you, and you thought, I'm never going to make it, right?
And that, it's very scary because you don't think it's scary, but you have a prof in front of you and say, play the scales. So you need to then switch half of a tone, play it again. So that is the entry level. And the kid was like, he was playing all the scales. And to me, I played number 1, second was difficult, 3 was impossible. And then and I was 27, he was 12, no, I quit.
So at that point, did you think wine could be your future or not?
I don't know, Tim. Wine to me is kind of a transition in my life, I think. I love wine. I am super passionate on wine. But I have other interests on my life, I really like to write. I have a book in my head, a second book I want to develop. And I really love other things, but cinema, for example.
Well, no, I'm talking more about when you were in Montpellier. Did you think at Montpellier, because you went to Paris, because then you went to Paris, didn't you? Because you did your PhD, and your PhD was in terroir, on wine?
Yeah, on terroir. But when I was in Montpellier, nothing. I mean, everything was about, working on the computer, doing maps, like soil maps or this kind of things. But mapping. Montpellier was mapping, and never about wine. And it was only the end of Montpellier. When I was finishing my work as a master, I had to create and develop a small thesis. And at that time, I was sent to Paris. And when I arrived to Paris, with this kind of very weird French professor I had, he was the super geek soil expert of France, and he was almost about to retire, and he was working with 2 different PhD on terroir. That's the first time I heard really the word terroir. I was invited to drink some wine from the Southern Rhone, because the PhD was about the Southern Rhone, and so. That was the first moment in my life I realized that one side can create a sound, like jazz, The sound, and the sound is the typicity and the terroir expression. I love the idea. It's like moving jazz to wine. It's the same thing.
And how old were you then? 27, 28?
27.
Yeah. So you'd not heard the word terroir till you were 27.
Totally. And in Chile, I never really drink wine in any way. So the first time I really started to drink was in Paris, with those guys.
How long did it take before you started as a consultant? I mean, who was your first client?
Oh, many years, because after that I did the PhD in France. And so when doing the PhD in Paris, you start to get, your own, you start to drink wine, you start to know about
and you
wine.
went to Burgundy, didn't you? You got interested in Burgundy.
I was in Paris, and my professor said, you need to select Bordeaux or Burgundy, basically. And I said, I went to Bordeaux first, Chile, Bordeaux. And I didn't like it. It's so industrial. Everything is so, visiting was like 1 hour visit, 2 wines, very boring. And then I went to Bordeaux and to Burgundy, and Burgundy is the opposite. 21 wines, 1 visit. And people that are more like me, more farmers, not so chic, etc. And that's how I met Louis Michel de Gebelair. And basically, I learned how to taste in that cellar on 2003.
And so, but Burgundy was that your first client? Was Louis Michel de Gebelair from Vin Romanée your first client?
No. My first client was at the end of 2003, Marcelo Retamal from Chile de Martino. So I met Marcelo in the Vinexpo 2003. So we knew each other. We went to the same school. So and he said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What are you doing here?" That's how I knew he was a young winemaker at De Martino, and he knew that I was doing a PhD terroir research, and he immediately said to me, "I want that at De Martino." And then we figured out how to work, and on 2004, I was living in France, but I was already traveling to Chile to start working with Marcelo.
So Chile was your first client, and then what about France? I mean, was it hard to get the French to take you seriously? This sort of jazz playing, Chilean.
France was never, to me, in my head, was never an option, You know, as a Chilean, you think Chilean.
Mm.
And France is too far away. So never in my dreams to work in France was really an option, you know. And France came later on time, you know, through Alberto Antonini.
Once you developed a reputation really in Chile.
Yeah, of course. Yeah? It took me 10 years. My first work in France was 2012.
Yeah.
So already 10 years.
Okay. We'll talk about Alberto later because he's an important part of your story, I think. I just want to know a little bit about how you describe your job. And I'm interested in how much of your job today as a terroir consultant, effectively, is science and how much of it is intuition. Do you find that if you walk into a vineyard, you kind of know what it's going to give you just by looking at it, even before you've dug a soil pit, a calicata?
No, I think, you know, I really like to say, like in a podcast like that, I hate science, you know, because during my PhD, I learned to never trust numbers. You know, numbers create fear in people, you know. But of course, I have a scientific approach to everything because I have done that for so many years. But, you know, Tim, what is essential to me is to know the geology. The geology is the main factor, the connector of everything. So if I know the geology, I will know how to equalize my brain, and I will know about the wine typicity. I drink a lot of wine, so I kind of know, you know, already. So if I am on limestone, I know where to go. If I am on granite, I will go in another direction. If I am on gravels, it's another direction. So it took me 13, 14 years to really have, like, in my head a specific equalizing for rocks and wine typicity, you know. The most important to me, number one, who is my client? How he drinks, you know. It's very, you know, I normally used to explain them, you know, that I went into a big funny discussion in Merceau about Dominique Lafon and Jean-Marc Rouleau. 99% of the world thinks the same. For them, it's huge difference. It's the opposite, massive difference. So the difference are small, very small. And I need to understand that in the beginning because that difference is going to come many times from the vineyard. A small difference in the vineyard can create a massive wine typicity difference.
That's interesting.
So I need to understand the owner.
Yeah.
Normally we go for a dinner and he will select the wines. I will ask to take a look on his cellar, and so I know what he drinks. You know,
that's interesting. Yeah, you've consulted all over the world. You know, France, Italy, Spain, United States. Is there anywhere that you haven't consulted that you'd like to go to and work? I mean, you're traveling less now because you've got your own wine project. Anywhere else you'd like to go?
I think, of course. I would love to work more in Barolo. I love Barolo very much. You know. And I have worked only once, and I think there is everything to do in Barolo. Also, Ontario, you know, in Canada, I think there is something there, an energy that I think is interesting to me. Beside that,
Greece?
I think Greece as well, for whites, and there is again an energy there, you know.
Yeah.
So I love energy. So I love to find this kind of places.
I agree with you. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, do you think great wine can be made anywhere these days? I mean, you know, the classics are still Burgundy and Bordeaux and Barolo, but do you think that we're changing our approach to wine? We're thinking, hey, great wine can come from Itata, for example.
I think geology is democratic.
Yeah.
It's all around the world. So that's the first thing. So it's not because you were doing wine for 200 years that your granite is better than my granite. We can have the same. You know, the difference is the interpretation of the granite. You know, how you play the music. And of course, there is more time, people understanding, you know, how to vinify and how to cultivate, you know, the vines in Europe than in Chile, for example.
Yeah.
But in terms of potentiality, you know, human scale is small. We're talking 100 years. So if we think wine in the next 200 years, which is still small, things are going to change for sure. There are so many fantastic terroirs beside Europe. You know, it's about time. It's about time. People You know, there is on wine something that is very big and it's a problem. It's insecurity. Insecurity, you know.
Yeah.
I am a small producer in the Itata Valley in Chile, so I talk small, never loud. I am very insecure because blah, 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 blah. And then blind, you can have something, you know. Yeah. So people need, it's not only Chile, it's Portugal, the south of France, some places in Spain.
Yeah, lots of places in Spain. Yeah.
Spain is incredible. It's atomic. It's mental.
Yeah.
Terroir is incredible. It's mental.
I mean, because you always say that Spain is the place where you've learned most, that you learn most. You're still learning most.
Spain, the new generation of winemakers are incredible. I mean, they are free mind, you know. They don't have, if you go to Italy, it's like that. If you go to France, it's double like that.
What you mean is that they're almost in handcuffs, yeah?
They cannot change anything, you know, the father, the grandfather. Yeah. It's a big problem for them because the global warming is forcing them to change. And they don't have the ability. They don't have the security to move and change. Spain is the opposite.
Yes.
They're change. You know, working in Priorat, for example, they have the minds are fantastic. You know.
I mean, you've studied and worked in some of the greatest vineyards in the world. You've talked about Jean-Marc Rouleau and Dominique Lafon in Barolo, and you've been to all sorts of places. Do great vineyards have something in common? Is it that energy that you're talking about? Do you think? Do you feel an energy in a great vineyard?
Yeah, if you make it simple, great vineyards are the same all around the world. It's a balance of energy. It's like a great restaurant all around the world. It's the same. But you can be in an Italian great restaurant or a French great restaurant or a Spanish great restaurant. So the ingredients are going to change, but the system is the same. And that is the most important part of my work. You know, it took me many, many years to understand the system. And that system that can be equalized, you know, of course, is all around the same. So everywhere I look, high-end wines come from the same system. Then more pepper, more salt, less salt, blah, 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 you know. But it's the same.
I like the comparison with the restaurant. They say that a great restaurant has things in common. I want to ask you about the word minerality. I mean, lots of people use it in wine circles. It's become a bit lazy almost. And how do you define it? Is it a word that you use to describe wines, or you talk more about something being atomic, don't you? And your energy. Do you like minerality as a word?
I like it, but it's dangerous, you know, because if you say this is mineral, you can start a fight. And I know that the fight is a stupid fight. People will say, prove it. I don't find the minerals in the wine. And it's very egocentric because people say, because I don't find the minerals in the wine, it's not mineral. And I will say, maybe you don't find the minerals in the wine because you are stupid, you know. So maybe in 20 years, we're going to find the minerals. We don't have the machines already. It's very egocentric. I don't find, it doesn't exist. Maybe it's not yet the time to find it, you know, because technology, wherever. Anyway, to me, minerality is an energy, is a tension, is a vibrato that you have especially in your mouth. You can smell it, but I think the real truth is in the mouth. You know?
Is the palate. I know, I agree with you.
It's the palate.
Yeah. Listen, we'll get to your wines in a minute, but they're very terroir focused, as are the wines you've made, the people you've consulted for over the years make. And you talk a lot about the soils in which they're grown. I mean, how much does a soil type, a terroir, have on the aromas and the flavors of a wine? It's not just the structure, is it? Can you talk about smelling of limestone, smelling of granite, tasting of granite? I think you can, can't you?
I think you can. Of course, there are, again, thinking like a restaurant, there are components that are more easy to smell, you know, and other components are very shy. So if you have shy components, for example, and then you have one big component, the big component is going to be always dominant. And that big component is the clay. When you have clay in your system, the wine is going to be very aromatic, you know, and because it's very aromatic, it's like Chanel No. 5.
What, clay?
Yeah, clay sometimes is too much. And when it's too much, you don't get the other flavors, other aromas that you can have, So people say, Pedro, you hate clay. And I say, no, I love clay, but only if I have the best clay in the world, like Chambord-Musigny. If I don't have that clay, I prefer not to have the clay.
And I like your idea about shy components. So granite and a limestone would be shyer components, would they?
It depends where on the limestone, because I also normally when I work, I try to separate terroir using simple words like biodynamic words. Some terroirs are fire, some terroirs are ocean. An ocean terroir is something that creates wines with a natural acidity, a natural sensation of balance. Never burning, never. And number one is limestone. So limestone is an ocean, and limestone comes from the ocean. Granite is also kind of an ocean. It's never heavy burn. Gravels are burning, fire. Basalt, fire. Schist, fire. So that is going to decide many times the approach on your winemaking. Because
where do you put clay?
Clay is the son of the schist. Clay is the son of the basalt.
The sand, you say?
The son. The son,
hijo. Oh, the son of schist,
yeah. So clay is fire.
Yeah.
As well. So when you have too much clay, you need to approach your winemaking to equalize down.
In a different way. Yeah.
It's like listening to Pearl Jam and you put everything up like hell. Boom. It's too much, So, and if you have limestone, that limestone is ocean. Yeah. So you need to push high a little. That's why Burgundy is super dominated by limestone. They vinify with very high temperatures.
Yeah.
If you do the same with schist on priorite, high temperatures, you kill the schist. You create a monster. That's why it's so important.
Very interesting. Tell us a little bit about Alberto, because you're involved with him at Altos Amigas in Argentina, but you've worked with him in lots of projects. And Alberto is one of the great wine consultants of the world, an amazing man and somebody I've learned a lot from over the years as well. What have you learned from Alberto from working with him?
The holisticity. For if I can say in one word, what I learned, Alberto is my mentor, so it's the holistic approach.
So the big picture, in a way.
The big picture, it's the big picture that viticulture, soil, winemaking, typicity, quality, purity, many things in one man. And also, Alberto is very dynamic, very open mind. So he switch super fast. He understands systems. So if we are in Australia, it's one Alberto. But when we're in Spain, it's another Alberto. And in Argentina, it's another Alberto. So he will switch immediately. So he understands very well that there is no one wine. It's different expression of the wine. So
he doesn't have a recipe, does he?
No, never. He's always, that's super fun because he's always changing, That's why I use the word dynamic. It's not the classical guy who arrived and said, we are going to do the same thing. First, the most important, he understands that he will decide how to vinify after Pedrito is in the hole telling him what is the terroir.
This is you. This is the hole in the ground, the calicata. Yeah. So you go and look. You go and look in the ground, and you say to him, "We've got ocean or we've got fire."
That's the thing. So normally Alberto gets a project. He will send me. Yeah. I will do my thing. I will go back. We want to have a coffee or wine, and then after that, Alberto is going to pick what I saw, and then he's going to move fast,
Okay, got you. I mean, tell us a bit more about the Itata Valley, where you are right now. It's one of the oldest regions in the New World, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about the terroir and the different sub-regions. Can you tell us about those?
Of course. Itata is the only place in Chile where I could produce wine for me because of the typicity that I like to drink, So Itata is south of Chile, cloudy weather, kind of La Loire or something like that. And with fantastic, very old decomposed granite in the soil. So we got a fantastic rock, a fantastic weather, also fantastic history because always dry farm, great viticulturists, bush vines, always the balance, the fine tune that you get on years and years. And we have 3 grapes that nobody knows, basically. Cinsault, Pais, and Moscatel again. But to me, it's never about the grapes. It's about the site first, And what I figured out for me, is that I love Cinsault. It's my Pinot Noir.
Tell me a bit more about Cinsault now. What makes it such a great grape variety? And when did it arrive in Itata?
Nobody knows. It arrived around 90 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who was the first or how. We know that Itata, everybody is married with everybody, like Burgundy. So you got one guy planted that, and the brother will plant it, and then in 1 year the wife is planting, and then. But Itata is not Cinsault. It's only Guariligüe. It's one area of Itata. So Guariligüe is the more pure terroir that you find in Chile as appellation because it's mostly Cinsault. It's what we do. And so 90 years ago, for example, my vineyard, where I produce 2 of the cru wines, Hab and Train, is about 86, 87 years old. One of the pioneers on that. And that grape, is a very productive grape. The only way that you can equalize down the grape, that grape is fire. So you need to equalize down. To equalize down, you need ocean terroir, sand, basically, no clay, and clouds, no sun. When you have this combination, very poor granite, sandy terroir with cloudy, rainy terroir, Cinsault shows finesse. And red fruit, vibrant, complexity with some iron reduction like Burgundy, and you get some flowers, some humidity, again, in the flavors. And in the mouth is what people call light, red, acid. If your terroir is good, it's long, and vibrant. So that's the description of a Pinot Noir.
I mean, when you set up your project, I think it was in 2013, you've been traveling around the world for 18 years. Were people already beginning to talk about Itata and say, hey, this could be a great wine region?
No, even me, myself, that's the sad part of the history. I never truly believe on Itata. My professor in Chillán, in the university, told me, Itata is the real thing, And I said, thank you, you are crazy. And I went to Maipo, blah, blah, blah. I think Louis-Antoine Louis was clever enough.
Crazy Frenchman, yeah, natural winemaker.
Yeah, but at the end, it's not Louis-Antoine. It was Marcel Lapierre. So Louis-Antoine was a friend of the son of
Marcel Lapierre from Beaujolais. Yeah,
it was Marcel Lapierre who said, this is great. Then was Joe Dresner in New York. Then the more clever, fast winemaker, Marcelo Retamal, said, something is happening there. And when I saw that Marcelo was there, Dresner was there, I said, oh, there is something there. And I went, the intelligent people. So when I went and I took my time to evaluate Itata, I figured out, wow, this is the place. It's too stupid. It's 35 minutes from home. I traveled the whole planet to go back home,
35 minutes away from where you live anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just tell me, I mean, I've been writing about Chile for a long time and, it's changed a lot for the better. What have been the big changes you've seen, the last 20 years while you've been involved in it? Since you made those first wines with Retamal, what's changed in Chile?
Important things. First, people start to drink good wines. So now you have 2 importers in Chile that bring 2 incredible international portfolios. So if you want to drink Biondisanti, you can have a bottle of Biondisanti. If you want to drink Dominique Lafon, you have a bottle. Pierre Peters, you have a bottle. So that means that the new Chilean generation of winemakers drink good wines. That is, to me, number one. Second thing, they travel. And to travel, to me, doesn't mean every 2 years I go to Vinexpo, To travel means every year I go to visit somebody, some places, to understand. Number 3, the terroir movement came in a good time. So there is another vision on the vineyard, on the sites, So those 3 are super important to me.
And we're going to see those things develop more in the future, do you think? It's going to continue?
We should. We still have one problem. That problem is it's a classical problem that's it's changing already, but should change faster. We are doing the same thing. Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Carmener. It's too narrow to express, Chile. Chile is complexity. We cannot express that with 4 grapes. We need to have 25 grapes,
And what should Chile be growing? What would you like to see grown?
There are many things, Whites. Why I need to go to Ribera Sacra or to Gallis to get super good whites on granite, where we can do better. We have better granite and better weather. So there is a family of something to explore around Gallis and Portugal. For
so
sure.
Albarino, maybe, and
Godello, for example. Chenin Blanc. I mean, again, think Champagne. Champagne is the best things that you get, or Riesling in Alsace. Alsace, you got granite with fantastic, Riesling. What is the Riesling here, So I know we can do. I know because I did it 2 years ago. We can do a great Chardonnay.
Yeah,
we can do way better Sauvignon Blanc, but there are other things. On red, it's the same thing. So there is a new expression of Carignan, great. Garnacha is coming, fantastic. There are other grapes, that can show you something, And I'm very happy about what is happening with Garnacha, Pais, and Cinsault.
And Cinsault, yeah.
Yeah, it's happening. It's not yet happening with Muscatel. Some people are trying to find. It's a difficult grape, but it will happen as well,
Tell us a bit about your wine style, because I like the way you define it. You say, I produce wines I want to drink, right? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, it means they need to be light, they need to have energy, obviously. What else would you describe as your style?
I normally explain it especially to my wife and my daughter and son. I went virgin into wine. So France, I was virgin. And my first really professional tasting was with Louis Michel in Bon-Romanée. And so I was pure, nothing. And that is, I used to call it my ratatouille, like the movie, when you go back in time to when you're a kid. And I remember that first day, that was May, 2003. And Louis Michel was telling me, red fruit, acid fruit, underbush, vibrance, energy, drinkability. Drinkability comes from Louis Michel. And basically means not heavy black fruit alcoholic that you're going to drink 30% of the bottle. That is drinkability. So that ratatouille was so important in my head. And then I think little by little, I start always to look for that expression. For many years, I worked in many places that had a different expression. And I was always trying to push to that drinkability of the wine. Because wine is for drink, not for...
People forget that.
Yeah, sometimes we forget that, Yeah. And then you get old, you get mature, your palate have a clear idea, and you start to fine-tune everything, And to me, I have a very good life as a consultant. I cannot complain. So why do wine? The only reason, there are 2 reasons. One, for my family, my kids in the future. Second, because I want to drink from Chile something that I like to drink, And so where is my Burgundy? Is a corner of Burgundy to me in Chile, and I was lucky. I found that corner in Guadalihue. In some soils, not all the soils from Guadalihue. Some of the soils in Guadalihue show that finesse,
that you want. I mean, we know that you're a jazz fan, massive jazz fan. There's always music on in the winery. You're a jazz musician. Your wines, a lot of your wines are actually named after jazz musicians. How do you decide which name to use for which wine? What does the wine come first, or does the musician come first?
No, the wine.
Yeah.
So at one moment, I will say I started in 2013. I got an idea on 2017. So it took me 5 years to recognize one vineyard, one sound. To me, it's a sound,
You're listening to the vineyard, are you? In a way?
Yes, listening to the vineyard and to the typicity in my mouth, So, for example, silty with a lot of iron, the wine is more rich, it's more heavy, it's more fruity. And it has a complexity. And I was always thinking something more slow and more heavy. And who plays like that? And that's Monk, that's Thelonious, da 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 da, da da da, big fella,
Yeah.
So I think Monk was the first name who came into my mind, Second, I had the opposite. Sandy, big quartz. The wine was sharp, vertical, always lacking a touch of complexity. So who is a musician who is vertical? Tension, tension with a lack of complexity. Freddie Hubbard. So that's how I started.
Trumpet player.
Yeah, trumpet player. And so I would say Monk and Hub were the 1 and 2. And then because I am a big fan of Coltrane, the third wine of 2017 was Train, but that was a mistake I made because that wine was good, the best one at the moment, but Train is a name to need to be a Grand Cru. And the wine was not a Grand Cru. So I made a mistake and it took me years to change that mistake and elevate Train to a Grand Cru,
So how many Grand Cru do you have? Is it Miles and Train, isn't it?
I have Miles and Nuke. So Nuke is Sonny Rollins,
Yeah.
So,
he died recently, didn't he? Very sadly.
No, he's still alive. Like 90.
Oh, is he?
It
was Wayne Shorter who died. Sorry, I'm going
way shorter.
Yeah.
Way shorter. Yeah. So I got 2 Grand Cru, Miles and Nuke, and waiting for Train. And it only happened when I bought the vineyard. So I owned the vineyard. I really changed things on viticulture. Basically, I put money. It's not that I want to change the way they work. I bring money to do it better. It's the only change. Yeah. And that the first change was in 2021, that the wine was, to me, the best wine in the cellar immediately.
So Train is now a Grand Cru?
Now, Train after 2022 is going to be a Grand Cru.
Okay, fantastic.
Should be.
There'll be 3 Grand Cru?
Yeah, there will be 3 Grand Cru.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Listen, last question. I could talk to you all day about this. It's fascinating listening to you. How do you get away from wine? Do you still play the saxophone? I know your kids are very important to you. I mean, how else do you relax?
So the family is important to me. I relax through movie. I love cinema, remember?
So that was from your granddad, Marcos, wasn't it?
From Marcos, Emil Fort.
Yeah.
So cinema is super important. So I have everything. Netflix, HBO, everything in the world. I can watch a movie. If I don't find a movie, I can buy it when I travel. Also, I get out, I like to read, a lot. Writing, I like to write. And spend time with friends and the family. So a very simple guy, yeah. And my life is different. It's like your life, Tim. We're like 2 people. When we're traveling, it's 1 person. At home, is one other person. I do travel, not as much as you do, but traveling is an energy that comes into my life. I go back full of energy, full of ideas. I was telling you Spain. Wow, I got so many ideas from Spain now that I want to develop. I want to make a champagne. I am 53. Yeah. I want to celebrate my 60s with a champagne.
Your own champagne?
My own champagne, But to do that, I want to learn so I need to go to Champagne, drink, meet people, and get, information in my head to be able to make it, It's not bad. I collaborate with Paul Crook, so I got a lot of information from Paul. And I'm learning fast, but I need to go for 1 week in Champagne and go into, the terroir, the subsoil.
That means digging another calicata, another pit.
And in the brain of people,
Yeah.
I want to understand them.
Yeah. Well, understanding them is what you do. Understanding the world of wine is what you do. Love your wines. I think the changes you've made around the world have just been incredible. And your book is well worth reading. Terroir Footprints. People can buy it. There are still copies. It's in Spanish, but also in English. Terroir Footprints. And you're going to be working on a 2nd book soon.
In French.
In French as well.
In French as well now. Athenaeum in Bonn.
Bon, s'il y a des Français qui écoutent ce podcast, vous pouvez l'acheter.
Voilà.
Oui, Athenaeum à Bonn.
Athenaeum à Bonn, 2000 copies en français, super bon.
Très bien. Okay, well, listen, lovely to see you, my friend, and we'll talk very soon. I hope to see you in Chile or in Rioja or Burgundy or somewhere in London. Pleasure talking to you. See ya.
See you soon. Ciao.
Pedro really does know his stuff, and I love the wines he's making under his own label. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is the American barrel broker, Mel Knox. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, @TimAtkin, and on Instagram, @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.